Good afternoon. Hello to everyone who's on the line. I want to welcome you to this month's XLHR webinar. I know that not everyone has arrived yet, but I'll go ahead and start in a little bit. Just again, thank you for choosing to spend some time with me on this webinar. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a chance to unmute yourself and ask questions or tell me your thoughts on the content. And as well, remember to look for some ways in which I can reach out reach out to you after and talk with you about any thoughts that may arise during the presentation that you'd like to explore offline. So again, welcome to the Top HR Pitfalls for Smart Entrepreneurs webinar, and thank you for coming. So I will go ahead and get started. Firstly, again, if you are not muted, I do recommend that for now. You'll have a chance to unmute yourself later. So on the agenda for today, number one, not by accident, is that entrepreneurs are awesome. We're going to look at um, some of the unanimously agreed upon greatest strengths of entrepreneurs. I'm sure that you're well aware of them. And when I talk about entrepreneurs, in that group, I also include founding leaders of a company or the executive team, the management team. So at XLHR, we specialize in working with small, mid-size, and growing businesses. So this webinar, even though I will refer to entrepreneurs, will apply to a broader group of people. And I hope you'll find yourself in it. And I hope it'll give lots of food for thought. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Um, and we'll also look at the ways in which awesome entrepreneur do not equal smart manager, unfortunately. And hopefully, this will function as a heads up to your top HR pitfalls. There are many HR pitfalls. That is why I have a job. However, there are some that really do apply very vividly, almost on a day to day basis, to someone who is starting and or growing a business, any leader who has hands-on influence in their business. And then we'll have the Q&A period at the end. So again, as promised, we are going to talk about how entrepreneurs are awesome, founding leaders are awesome. And these are just 5 of my favorite greatest strengths. But most studies do agree that these traits are essential to success as an entrepreneur. And these are in no particular order of importance, although, self-discipline and persistence, our first one, is probably one that I've heard most successful entrepreneurs point to as the key. Strong people skills help open doors, a clear sense of direction, passion, and being decisive and action-oriented. So those, again, are very often represented by studies as being among at least the top 10. And for the purposes of this presentation, these are the strengths that can tend to be the most important double-edged sword to mind. Unfortunately, again, your greatest strengths as an entrepreneur, they won't directly translate into good leadership of your company. Assuming that they will is at the root of all the pitfalls that will follow. You may have honed skills, though, that'll help you avoid them better than average, but a little more awareness can only help. In my work with founding leaders of small and mid-sized businesses, I've truly admired these people that I've worked with. That's why I love working in my current job as manager of the client-facing HR consulting team here at XLHR. I really have felt a lot of empathy for how some of their greatest strengths have led them wrong. It doesn't seem right. What might seem, though, like common sense and natural is not often the best approach. In fact, it's often not the best approach. Let's explore that a little bit. So we're going to look at how as a universal principle, and you've, I'm sure, heard this before many times, the very strengths that we lead with can eclipse other more helpful ones in any given situations, in any given situation. Um, and with employees, even slight missteps tend to have big ripple effects. Yes, things somehow get more complicated when people are involved. It's not your fault, and awareness is really key. So, this is what the presentation, this is what the webinar, and this hopefully the discussion afterward will be about. Awareness really does help. And that said, you will make mistakes. Ideally, you'll have others to lean on who can help you navigate these pitfalls on a day to day basis so that you can focus on your core business. This is not, none of this is to say that you should change or to minimize these great strengths that you have honed in order to be successful. In fact, when you are dealing with people day in and day out who are your employees, you just need to know these things. And sometimes when your company is just starting out or is too small to have been able to engage other experts yet, which we'll talk about solutions for that too. Or anytime you're in a particularly rapid growth phase, you might be more hands on. So, managing people can be a humbling experience. It's not just you, I promise. And there are those days when no matter how mindful you are, you're going to say to yourself, whoa, what did I just fall into? Well, that would be a pitfall. And they always catch us by surprise by their very nature. And more awareness always helps. So, the first great strength of yours that may be likely to make you more susceptible than average in one HR area is that is your self-discipline and persistence. See, you're likely above average, high above average in this area. And probably that's been ingrained in you since childhood. Some of it might even be innate. So you don't think about it a lot. It's just the way you do things, right? You manage and you drive yourself to very high standards. Now, this very strength might lead you into expecting the same sense of urgency as yours without actually communicating clearly. Remember, you've been honing this since childhood. So you take it, it's just the way you do things, and you may not be as good at explaining as um, as others may be. Who are even not as good in this area as you are. You can mistake normal fluctuations in performance consistency and other shortfalls for lack of self-discipline and follow-through. And the worst thing is that you might be blaming employees for your own shortfalls. So, how do you avoid this pitfall? Well, firstly, catch yourself. Did you maybe not communicate your expectation precisely in the first place? You might think you did and did not. If you didn't, you can't really know that people are letting you down, no matter how it might look to you. Did you actually communicate your expectation, either verbally or in writing, but did you actually say it? If you catch yourself thinking, they should know better, then that's a clue right there you might not have. Did you issue an instruction or a request? There's a difference. So think of the difference between, saying, it would be great if I could have this by Friday, and saying, I'll need to receive your draft by end of business on Friday. In just saying it, you could easily think that they're roughly equivalent, but they really are not. They are received in a very different way. Respect boundaries, too, around the home lives of your team. And that will lead to your not losing their heart and their greatest efforts. So I find it helpful to set up internal triggers for intervening thought processes when you find yourself leaping to judgment. Leaping to judgment, of course, is a problem because it alienates your employees, it short circuits your ability to actually obtain better performance. So, really question that feeling. When you find that you are feeling let down, maybe that all of your employees are letting you down and no one seems competent enough. It's completely understandable that you would have that impression. There's a lot on your shoulders. You're probably low on sleep. You're probably feeling pretty alone in it all. But improving performance is a partnership. Actually, in improving partnership is is great too. Know your own failings so you don't fall into blaming others whose support you actually need. So accidental ways in which you alienate people can be avoided. The second pitfall that is brought to you by your strong people skills. Doors of opportunity might open more readily for you than for the average person because you have a really engaging way of relating to others. You're able to get them excited about your vision and easily gain their trust. You're like a surfer on this great big wave of charisma. But that can lead you into this second pitfall, which is the cobbler's children effect. Accidental neglect and selective hearing. You might forget to turn those amazing people skills enough inward toward the organization. And when you do, you might surf right by, overlook the more quiet members of the organization, the ones who are less like you. And we'll talk about that bias a little more later on too. And also another thing that can cause you to accidentally neglect certain employees and be selective in your hearing is that you probably favor positivity so much because it's more energizing, right? That you don't you might accidentally shut out important perspectives. You don't have time for negativity. That is true, but also you can mistake important perspectives for negativity. Know that the more authority and charisma you're perceived to have, the less truth people will tend to volunteer to you. They want to please you, especially if it's perceived that you tend to shut out what is less positive. So do yourself the favor of having the benefit of the most input possible. A little bit on avoiding this pitfall, a little bit more. Schedule days in the office with at least a block of time for proactive, direct staff interaction. You'll miss this when you get too big. Um, at least that's what I'm told. If your organization is too big or spread out already geographically to allow this, and or if you just need conversation starters, you can ask supervisors to share fun facts with you about the employees who report to them that you can use as individual conversation openers so you can be more engaging. You can even ask your recruiter to gather those facts for you about your selected candidates. Don't show favorites, give equal attention. The rule of thumb is that for each time you reach out to prospects, reach inside the organization. So, not showing favorites is not just an in organization thing. It's important. Of course, it's vital for you to have great relationships, vibrant relationships with your network, but turn it inward and network with your employees. Have an internal communication partner who helps keep you communicative because you might think you're being communicative and not be coming across that way. So, being proactive in that area with newsletters, town halls, lunches with staff, whatever it is that works for you. You have a right hand person, hopefully, who can help gather your thoughts, craft communications for you, keep you plugged into the pulse of your teams. If you do not have a person like that, it's great to find one. It's very valuable to find one. Now, another great strength that can lead you into pitfalls is your clear sense of direction. How in the world could that ever lead you into trouble? You have an above average ability to stay on course and to know what needs to come next. You have a strong sense of alignment to mission and your desired outcome. But your clear sense of direction could lead you into pitfall number 3, casting shadows instead of lighting the path. So for you, the path could be very obvious, but typically employees need, and they might even expect or wait for, hang back for at least some individual guidance. And depending on the size and structure of your company, they might be looking to you for that. Some of that has to do with an individual sense of authority. So, whether or not they feel they need permission, depending on how much you want to empower your employees to make their own decisions, you can mitigate that. But most of this is due to the fact that they can't see as far ahead as you on the path of your company. And that is perfectly normal. You're standing in front of them, after all, as you should be. You are leading your company. You are ahead of them on that path. You need to guide them. So, into more specifics, avoiding pitfall number 3, brought to you by your clear sense of direction. Um, Give your employees a clear sense of direction in their work. Depending on the size of the organization, you might need help, because we're talking about getting a little more granular, not micromanaging, but to the level of each person's role and how it ties to your mission. So you, as a founding leader, might start with a mission and values statement, and plus the basics that you need from each role. You might even need help or want to have help in defining the roles that will exist in your company. So engage someone with management knowledge and strong writing skills to articulate specific goals and job elements your employees need to know. So it helps if someone has HR knowledge and experience to help in that project. And remember, just remember to keep turning around. You're looking forward. You're looking ahead of you on the path of your company. Keep turning around to shed light on the path toward your employees. Otherwise, you may be casting a pretty big shadow. And it has nothing to do with your intention. You have the best of intentions. But they can't see where the company is going unless you keep showing them. You don't actually need formal performance reviews, but do have fluid communication, either directly from you or via the direct managers, that is actionable. So it's practical, it's not too vague and not too micro, and documented so that people can look back to it. Um, so don't forget that your clear sense of direction, as it pertains to your business, is not innate to your employees. It's not automatic. Even if you've hired the best clear thinking people that you could find. So, the third great strength that can lead you astray is your passion. And I can't say enough about that strength. No matter what the desired outcome is for you, I know that it's some kind of passion that fuels this above average ability to maintain your momentum when obstacles get in your way. And that's probably what you muster to get up every morning and greet the day with energy and determination on a consistent basis. You know it's critical for your success. It can lead you into mistaking passion for talent and skill on the part of your employees, because passion for your mission, when you are an entrepreneur or a founding leader, it's so important. You might overvalue it in your employees or your candidates. You're hiring and you're tolerating mediocre performance possibly in favor of passion for your mission. So it's very exciting when you meet candidates who are so excited about what your business is doing. But when the pedal hits the metal on a day-to-day basis, it's actually more important, we'll see this later, to have a different kind of passion. So, whereas the performance of those who show less passion for your mission might be actually judged more harshly by you, you might be glossing over valid concerns about performance of others who look more excited. So, how to avoid this pitfall? Hiring for passion is very important. The passion, though, the key is that the kind of passion you look for should be passion for the actual work that's going to need to be done, it's way more important than the passion for your mission, which is also important. As appealing as you find it to be in your candidate, don't be blinded. Consider pre employment testing in areas that are relevant to the actual job needing to be performed. And if you're interested in that, we can talk about that in the Q&A period. Don't be the only one to interview your candidates. We find that having at least 3 people for whom it is relevant to interact with this role that you're interviewing for, it helps to have them interview the candidate too, to counteract any bias that you may likely have in this area. And there are certain questions that you can be asking your candidates. Now, I know last month's webinar by my colleague Kevin um, contained a lot of great information about how to hire top talent. So I'm probably not adding much to that. But I like asking a candidate about whether whether they can tell you about an impactful mentoring relationship that they've had at any time in their life, really, even in childhood, and talking with them about what they learned from that mentor. If they come alive on that question, if they love talking about that, it's meant that they have lent themselves well to mentoring at some point. And it means that they are the kind of person in the first place who is interested in learning and becoming their best. Now, you might kindle that in anyone because you're probably pretty inspiring yourself, and I try to do away with the word but, um, and if there's evidence that this is someone who lends themselves well to mentoring, then it's likely that they have a learning mindset. And you really want that because these are the people who do not give up when they fail. You know how important that is. It points to passion for the job when combined with proper screening for the job, and also points to strong work ethic, which is another thing that comes through in the form of persistence. And you need that. You really need that in your founding team. Looking for evidence of adaptability to change, which translates to emotional maturity. It has nothing to do with age. Looking for that as a great partner to the job-related aptitudes and passion are great predictors of success in especially small and mid-sized companies, in a growing company. All of those, and they're always good qualities. So, another question that you can use in an interview setting is, did your candidate pursue a hobby as a child that is related somehow to the job opening? So an IT professional, for example, who loved to take apart the toaster and maybe built a motherboard when they were a child, even if you're interviewing for more of a software related position, this still indicates the type of intellectual curiosity and aptitudes that match up very well with IT jobs. So you can pretty much assume that your candidate has a relevant job related passion and aptitudes. Another good one is related to the adaptability to change, which is correlated actually with the ability to feel or the tendency to be excited by change rather than freaked out by it. So, has your candidate enjoyed contributing to projects, helping develop processes within a relatively unstructured environment? So, an office manager, for instance, who helped get a new company off the ground, that's someone who's probably adaptable to change and probably has qualities that could translate into other roles. Um, these factors, when combined, are excellent predictors of success, especially in your growing company or a company that is relatively small, less structured, going through a growth phase. So now on to the next great strength that can lead you wrong. But first, let's talk about that strength. Um, this is one that every functional human being needs. So You've probably honed it extra finely. Thinking shortcuts, cognitive shortcuts, and gut smarts that enable quick decisions and impactful action. I have never seen a highly successful entrepreneur who has not overcome any tendency toward analysis paralysis. Your ability to make quick common sense assessments has served you well and probably does every day. But it can lead you into a pitfall when it comes to HR related matters. And this is a big one. In HR, you often need to slow down your thinking, and that can be really frustrated. Actually, I use that as one of my favorite red flags when I talk to powerful managers. Is whenever I hear impatience, the first thing that they probably don't want to do but need to is to slow down their thinking. Um, Heed caution now and thank yourself later, I say. I have a few examples of how this pitfall can show up day to day. So, the first one is accidental policies. I often get involved with a business owner or a founding leader a little bit late in the game in this area because you may not realize that every decision you make or that you allow to be made by default becomes part of a story. So, in everyday people management, your decisions are not isolated. Unfortunately, they can't be. And the light of retrospect will connect the dots for you. So, your employees are hanging on to your every word and weighing your every action more than you realize. It just helps to remember that. There's no such thing as casual anymore, and that has a lot to do with the power and authority that you are perceived to have just by virtue of your role. No matter what your personality and no matter what efforts you may be making to be a really down to earth, personable leader, this is still the case. So, any outside party who ends up looking due to maybe a dispute that's brought to light to an outside agency, this can bring us into sticky legal territory. Anyone looking from the outside will have the benefit of looking in retrospect. And by the time this becomes a problem, um, rash decisions, isolated decisions that aren't consistent with precedent. By the time these things become a problem, the light of retrospect can be harsh. So, as leader, as a founding leader or entrepreneur or member of the executive or management staff, you're always reverse engineering. So, align with your ideal future state, your ideal outcomes, always. Management decisions establish precedents, even if you're not, especially if you're not doing that on purpose, um, or whether or not you're doing that on purpose. They are implied promises to your employees as to how similarly situated individuals and similar situations will be treated in the future. They determine your culture. They determine the fabric of your workplace culture, no matter what you communicate deliberately. So don't undermine yourself. Every decision and the cumulative total of your decisions, the pattern of your decisions, are stand ins for policies until you've written them. And certain policies you may never have in writing because practices are quite equivalent to policies, again, in the light of retrospect. And they can prove or undermine your company's consistency with any written policies. So, consistency can speak for your company's standing as a good corporate citizen. Um, Policies don't always have to be written down, as I said, and you don't always want to rush to write them down too fast. So, your actions really do matter. And when you make mindful decisions, they turn into practices that will scale well into the future state of your company if you are mindful. Now, the second example of the pitfalls that can be brought to you by your decisiveness and your decision orientation is being a victim of your own bias. This one's very interesting and can't be avoided completely. Every functional human being, again, has thinking biases. There's a fascinating book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Slow, Thinking Fast, and so without it talks about how without thinking biases, we cannot filter input, visual, auditory, written. Making any decision at all would be impossible. And that said, in people management, biases can bring trouble. There are three frequently encountered ones: the first impression bias, the similarity like me bias, and selective perception and confirmation bias. There's really good work by Heidi Halverson on this topic, and it's very practical in its application. You can look her up, Heidi Halverson. The first impression bias is one that occurs often, that can carry over from individual's first day. Ask yourself, is this person really doing more poorly than average on their second day? Or am I more irritated with this person because of something that they did or said on their first day? The similarity like me bias is an important one because um, when an individual is like you, particularly as a leader, an entrepreneur, it might mean that they blew you away in their interview with their charisma. And you can tend to find yourself, again, favoring those individuals once they are employed by you, and uh, kind of doing yourself disfavor by minimizing the amount of diversity on your team. So you want intellectual diversity on your team because then you'll have a more well-rounded, more effective, more resilient organization. So again, you cannot avoid biases, but you can set flags for yourself. So if you find yourself really, really liking a candidate or an employee, ask yourself, am I experiencing like me bias? And then know that you're inclined to be showing favoritism. And the way to mitigate that self is to just have an internal dialogue going on, telling yourself to be mindful, and just keep listening, or make sure to um, be treating this candidate or employee in the same with the same level of scrutiny or the same level of good graces that you would afford any other. So, before we go into a Q&A period, I just want to acknowledge that, again, those were just some common pitfalls that specifically are more common because of the strengths that you tend to lead with as an entrepreneur, as an executive, as a founding leader. But there are, of course, others, including scaling too fast. That's one that we see that can stem from not properly allocating roles and defining them. And again, you can have help in doing that at the onset. That can help you avoid scaling too fast. Placing perceived loyalty above all else. I see this a lot where I worry is when we forget that loyalty can be imitated, can be faked. What you really want is people who are performing strongly and consistently, and who do bring you uh, constructive feedback. The closer you are to the top, so to speak, it's important to know that the less truth people will be bringing you in general. So don't fall into having people feel that they are being disloyal to you if they bring up concerns to you. And not to you necessarily directly, but via their manager as well if you have a staff. Tolerating poor behaviors by um, putting it sort of under the umbrella of, oh, that's just their personality. Whenever I hear that, my red flag goes off, and I know that I need to help a business leader to think of um, problematic personalities, so to speak, as a set of behaviors that can be objectively addressed. So, where I have said tolerate constructive criticism, that is not to equate that with negativity. So, chronic negativity, yes, is a problem. And often is hidden under the label of just personality, but that you do not need to tolerate. In the same category would be gossip and overly dramatic behaviors you might have encountered. That's also the same in the same category of pitfall. Another, on a completely different note, making someone salaried, quote unquote, to avoid paying overtime. Know that there is no such thing. You are not in charge of who is exempt from overtime and who is not. Guess who? It's the IRS. And so there's a set of rules. You might want to consult someone with HR experience to help you be certain that you are correctly classifying your employees as overtime exempt or not. You can pay someone a salary if they are not exempt from overtime, but you still need to track their time and pay for every bit of time over 40 per week or whichever applicable state law there is to override that. Um, Doing favors. So, right off the bat, when you are just starting out, you may be more prone to doing favors by hiring family member of someone you network with, for instance. That's fine as long as these people really do stack up against the other equally qualified candidates. And it's fine as long as the role really does exist for these people. Otherwise, a good out, because I know there can be a lot of pressure there, a good out is to say, I would love to forward your family member's resume to my recruiter. My recruiter has a whole set of screening criteria that they use, but by all means, we would love to consider your family member. So you can even, if you're starting out, it doesn't hurt to have experts on your side to help you. Uh, Another pitfall that I see is the belief that you can allow employees to voluntarily waive legal rights, especially pay related ones. Again, please know that there is no such thing as waiving a legal right. Now, I know that this presentation has not gone into a lot of legally related pitfalls, or rather, laws that are related to different thresholds that you may reach as you grow in size. That's another topic. But pay related laws apply to everyone. So I just want to highlight that. Now, remember, you don't have to go it alone. Managing people is a humbling experience. It's not just you, and I will be opening it up to questions and answers. Um, just so I don't neglect to do so, I want to point out that our next webinar will be a business owner's guide to selecting a group health plan, and you can register today. And we also offer a free HR compliance audit. So when you reach out for this, you'll be put in touch with me or one of my team members, and we'll go through a set of questions with you to assess your general strength, any vulnerabilities that we see, and recommendations. And we'd love to do that for you and or with you. And we are also offering a really special promotion here, one free month of HR and payroll services, cash value up to $1,200. So you can go to our website, xlhr.com/free month, and find out more about that. If you inquire anytime this week, I believe the promotion ends on Friday, this Friday, February 15th. 2019. However, if you do inquire this week, you're in. We will love to talk to you about this. And here is how you can follow us on social media. Our handle is at XLHR on any of the venues shown on the screen. And at this point, I'd love to invite you to unmute yourself. And if you ask me a question that I can't answer right now, I will follow up with you. So thanks again for attending.